With all that being said, as an incredible Apple lover of all things Apple, if the opportunity came to you to switch to Android, would you do it? And we're back. I'm here with Rob. I'm so excited because for all the times that we've done these videos, I've been doing it with people that are the average consumer. But Rob is actually one of the people that's just like you. He watches tech YouTube videos. He loves tech. He's completely ingrained into the Apple ecosystem. So the challenge today is to see if we can take the absolute flagship from Samsung, give it to an Apple fan, and see what happens. Rob, thank you so much for taking part of this.
Yeah, I'm kind of excited and also a little hesitant about it.
Yeah.
Like you said, I am very ingrained in that Apple ecosystem, as you can tell. So I think this is going to be kind of an interesting challenge to see the other side of things. But yeah, I mean, I've got some concerns and questions, and we'll see how it goes.
So I think you told me when we DM'd a while back that you really haven't had any real exposure to Android. Tell me about that.
Android came out, didn't really interest me all that much, but eventually I got an iPod, and that ended up being what kind of got me thinking about Apple. And I'm like, hey, it would be really cool if this were a phone. So then I got an iPhone, and it just kind of spiraled from there.
What is the best thing about being in the Apple ecosystem, would you say, if someone has never been a part of it? Like, what is the thing that you love the most?
I'd say probably the fact that everything is everywhere. Like, whatever device I happen to be using in that moment, all my stuff is there, just automatically. So if I'm working on my work laptop, which is a MacBook Air, and all my text messages are right here. And if I switch over to my phone because I need to go out and run an errand, it's all right there. Or if I'm in the living room where I happen to be on my iPad most of the time, it's all right there. Everything is synchronized. I don't ever need to think about it. It's all where I need it, and it all works together.
All right, cool. Yeah, which is, you have the iPhone 13 Pro Max, right?
Yeah, I do.
So it's really legitimately the latest and greatest versus the latest and greatest. And to be clear, like, really what this whole series is about isn't so much like which one is better. It's taking someone who's been, exposed to one thing and just exposing them to something different and kind of sharing their feelings about it. So let me ask you, I mean, obviously you've been happy with what you've been doing. Why are you even open to this?
Kind of as you mentioned, I am a tech enthusiast. I've kind of felt like there's been this whole other side of tech that I've really never experienced. Like, I've never had any experience to the Android platform other than occasionally helping my dad get things going on his phone because he's got one. Mm-hmm. So I'm interested to see that side of it. I'm a little scared because I have gotten so, let's use the word indoctrinated into the way that Apple does things, that I think that change is going to be a little bit scary, but there's something exciting about that.
Is there something in particular that you're looking forward to in this entire thing? Because obviously there's things you're missing, but you're doing it because in some way you're like, I'm kind of curious as to what I'm missing out on. Is there something specifically that maybe you heard of or even are aware of that's like, actually, you can't wait to try that thing, whatever that is?
I often hear, oh, that's not new. Android's been doing that for years.
Yeah.
And I'm really interested to see, I've been sticking with Apple because I firmly believe that once they roll something out, they've pretty much got it.
Yeah.
They usually don't roll out something as half-baked. There are, of course, exceptions to that.
Yeah.
But I am interested to see, where is Android on the cutting edge right now? What are the things they're doing now that I'll find in my phone 3-4 years down the road, however long it takes, right? I think that's going to be the most interesting part of it. So yeah, that's going to be exciting for me.
There's a potential for you to have this longer than a week. Typically, I challenge people to have it for a week. I've actually challenged one other person to have it for 2 weeks. I'm interested in why you'd be willing to do that without even kind of getting into it, and why specifically. You've told me, but I love the idea behind this.
In a couple weeks, I'm going to be going down to Walt Disney World, maybe running a race down there. I'll have my Apple Watch to do my timing and things like that. But if I go down, I'm not bringing my laptop. I'm not bringing my iPad. I'm going to bring my phone. And if that phone isn't the one normally connected to my watch, if this is the thing that I have to live with for the 5 days or so that I'll be down there, and at Walt Disney World, you kind of have to have a phone, right? Everything is driven based on that experience now. If that's not working, if I can't rely on that, that's really going to be, for me, what determines whether or not I could move over to Android and kind of get out of the Apple ecosystem if I chose to do that. I think that's going to be the thing that's going to be really interesting for me, and again, a little bit scary. But that's the perspective that I haven't seen from a whole lot of people, is someone who throws their hat over the wall and now is forced to go get it, right? If I am absolutely forced to live with this thing as a daily driver, someplace that I'm not super familiar with and where I need it to be able to function down there. How is that going to go? All right, it's Rob again. I'm going to unbox the phone that Travis sent me. He's kind of told me what it is already, but he wants that unboxing experience for this, so I'm going to do my best. Here's the box. All right, so first oh boy, this is heavier than I thought it was going to be. I don't know why I thought it was going to be pretty light. I'm kind of used to my iPhone at this point. It's certainly more top heavy than I would expect. I mean, it's just, it's such a large device. It's hanging out over the ends of my fingers a little bit. The 13 Pro Max is already kind of a big phone, but this is even taller than that in terms of aspect ratio. So that's going to take a little bit of getting used to. My hands are not terribly big, so if I'm holding it comfortably, I'm only about halfway up on the device here. So it just kind of feels like it's hanging loose off the end of my hand. Overall, first impressions, I mean, it is a really nice device. Like I said, a little bit heavier than maybe I was expecting. I don't know, what I was expecting necessarily. But yeah, it is really tall. I mean, you can kind of see that once the screen it's kind of powered on there, that is a really tall screen, goes practically to the edges there. That's pretty impressive. It's interesting because, the iPhone is using all of Samsung's panels anyway in there, and I'm so used to the wider bezels on that. Having something where the screen is going right to the edges of the phone is a pretty interesting first impression. Last night, which was Monday, was pretty rough. I felt like I was in a good spot to do that unboxing on Monday after, spending the weekend making sure I have the critical stuff thought through. And I recorded the unboxing video and then started the process of getting all my stuff moved over to the new phone. And then the data sync failed. And that was because I had to restart in the middle while I was doing the eSIM transfer. And it said the eSIM transfer would take up to 2 hours when it should be instant, which was weird. So anyway, I set up what I could and then went to bed for the night, figuring it would be working in the morning. And I got woken up in the middle of the night by a couple of notification sounds on the Ultra at about 3 a.m. And apparently when you change the volume on the side, it doesn't change the volume for everything, just for some things, and notifications are separate. The notification has to be up before you change the volume on it. Really weird, but anyway, I couldn't get back to sleep after that, so I went to go see where I was at with the eSIM transfer, which was nowhere. I had to wait until my wife got up in the morning so I could call T-Mobile with her phone, get the information I needed on her phone since her phone was still working and authenticated to get the Ultra going. So no indication why they didn't work at first. I literally did the same steps that I did the previous time, just this time it happened to work. There's a possibility T-Mobile did something on their side that I'm not aware of, but all I know is after I got through that phone call, we got it working. All right, so once I got done with that, I set up the data transfer again and got a few things moved over. I intentionally did not move over a bunch of the stuff that I had from previous iPhone upgrades. I mean, I've got years and years and years of old apps in there that I don't really use anymore or anything like that. I did make sure to include any app I was going to need over the next couple of weeks, particularly since I'm going to be going on a trip to Walt Disney World. I want to make sure all my travel and all my Walt Disney apps are in there. But as I started moving everything over and getting all those apps reset up, I started running into the next bit that I apparently had not fully thought through, which is all my passwords and stuff are in my Apple keychain. And I'm so used to having it just automatically synced between all my devices that being prompted for passwords again, I had to figure out how to get those out of my keychain, get them moved over. It wasn't too bad, but it was definitely kind of a one-by-one process. That part of it wasn't too bad. The part that was really confusing, though, is that it seems to be random which of the multiple password managers on the Ultra are going to come up and request that I save that password based on where I am. It doesn't feel like there's any rhyme or reason to it. The Samsung one feels a little bit more finicky for whatever reason than the Google one does. So I'm kind of starting to lean more and more towards the Google side of things to make sure that I've got everything all in one place there that's more portable. There just seems to be a lot of redundancy on this device in particular. I do like that you can set your own default app for some services. I didn't know up until this point that you can use Facebook Messenger for SMS. That was an entirely new thing for me. I do need to still figure out if I'm going to disable iMessage. That was one of the warnings that came up, and I have noticed that when my wife texts me, I don't get it on my phone because it's going through iMessage. So if I want it to show up on the phone, I've got to disable it. But if I disable it, then it's not going to show up on my my laptop or my iPad or those sorts of things. So I do need to figure out which I'm going to prefer. As I start digging into this, hopefully the next update will feel a little bit more positive than this one, but that's where I'm at so far. All right, hi everyone, it's Friday, and I've been sitting with the S22 Ultra for about 3 days now, and it's more or less in a stable place. I'd say stable, not necessarily enjoyable, but at least I feel like I can live with where it is now. I have the apps on it I need for my upcoming trip. The stuff I use daily is more or less reliable, and I think I'm good to go. But talking about the notifications, the little counter on the apps that says how many things are in there waiting for me, for whatever reason on this device, it doesn't change right away when I clear those things. I think it finally updated at some point overnight. Maybe there's some sort of timing interval or something that might be set to, or how often it pulls the service. I've gone back into those apps so many times to make sure that I didn't miss anything. Like, did another notification come in while I wasn't paying attention? I'm starting to wonder if that's the point. Like, if it's to increase my engagement with these apps. There's a certain level of trust here that I don't really have with Google or with Samsung, and I think that's crept into my thinking. And that may be why that I'm having that thought about whether or not this is like a nefarious thing. Are they trying to increase my engagement with that app for some reason? Is it about data collection? It's probably a setting I've missed or some sort of bug, but I shouldn't be thinking that. And I think it's just because I trust Apple more than I trust these other companies over the years that I've been working with them. But anyway, I mentioned that because I got a notification today that some of the apps I hadn't used regularly would go into deep sleep. And a warning came along with that it would potentially break some of these apps, and I wouldn't get notifications. And that's kind of worrying because that's, again, not something I've ever had to worry about with my iPhone. Is one of the apps that I'm taking for granted that are going to send me these notifications not going to work when I need it to? And as I mentioned, I'm getting ready for a trip, and one of the apps that was in that list is Ring. I need to make sure that works when I'm traveling. That the phone is giving me any reason to be concerned that my apps might not work is not a feeling I want from a device that I'm relying on for that sort of thing. The last thing that's kind of occurred to me over the past few days is just how boring phones are now, and I am including my iPhone in that. The apps are mostly the same on both devices with some UI peculiarities and things like that. So much so that the device itself has become kind of meaningless. It's just a tool to get you into those apps. I wondered if I was alone, and I found a YouTube vid from someone else who did a similar switch, and I noticed he got a Galaxy Watch too. Which leads me to think that once you're kind of deep in this walled garden that these devices kind of create, you can't escape just by switching the core device. It's not really that easy. Being able to copy on one device and paste on another has been so ingrained at me at this point that I was struggling to understand why I couldn't paste passwords copied from my iPad to the S22 while I was going through that setup process. I had to do it, type everything in all in manually. So that said, end of next week, I'm going to be going to Walt Disney World, and the one thing I can say I'm excited about is to see how good the camera quality is. I'm not taking my iPhone with me on that trip at all. The S22 is going to be all I have, and I'm really optimistic that the pictures it takes will be great. I'm kind of excited to see.
So we're 1 week in from Rob going from his iPhone now to the Galaxy S22 Ultra. Quite the experience. Tell me a little bit about the first couple of days of you going from something that was so integrated into your life into something completely new and different.
Yeah, it's been rougher than I'd hoped it was going to be.
Sure.
To be fair, I kind of anticipated a little bit of that, but it was still rougher than I thought.
Okay.
The big thing was just it's been so long since I switched to a different device and had like so many different other things that needed to change along with it, like the whole eSIM situation and getting that transferred over failed the first time. getting the data moved over. They've got this really cool thing where you can literally just hook the two phones together with a lightning cable and it'll start transferring data. But that failed partway through because I was doing the eSIM transfer at the same time, which was a big mistake.
Gotcha.
So it was that first night was pretty rough. After that, once I kind of got all that stabilized and I got my kind of default apps that I need on there, things seem to have settled down. I think the weirdest thing for me, though, is that I'm using it more than I really use my phone. And part of that is because since I had an Apple Watch, I would get notifications on this, could quickly dismiss them, never had to touch my phone unless I really needed to interact with it.
Gotcha.
Since I don't have that going on, I'm picking up the phone more. I'm using it more. I'm doing the things I got the Apple Watch to help me prevent doing, right?
Gotcha.
If anything, it's kind of reminded me that these devices have all gotten to the point where they're all pretty darn good, and they're very similar in a lot of ways.
What would you
probably
say,
more than people would think.
What are the things that have surprised you in like a good way about being on what is right now Samsung's best phone?
Is kind of bezel-less in a way that Apple claims they are and really aren't.
Right.
That's been really interesting. The screen is really high quality. I ratcheted up the resolution, turned up the refresh rate on it, all that good stuff. It's eating the battery, as you can imagine.
Of course.
But it is a really good screen. You can see why Apple uses Samsung for their screens. It's really fantastic. The one of the weirdest things that I've been kind of struggling with here is this concept where they have the home screen, and you can slide left and right to be able to get to the various apps on your home screen, but you slide up, and then there's all your actual apps are there. And that's kind of where they live. But it's shortcuts on the home screen. Kind of getting around that mentality has been it's been a little rough. And if I'm in that moment where I'm like, oh crap, when was our dinner reservation again? And I go fumbling around there, am I going to be able to find what I need in time, right?
An entire week left. I don't know why you did this to yourself. You'd have want to told me you went 2 weeks. So let's find out what happens, everyone. Here's his next journal, I think from Disney or right after. Check it out.
My wife and I are back from our trip to Walt Disney World, and while I have some very strong opinions on what the Disney experience is like in a post-Genie Plus world, I'm happy to say the Galaxy S22 Ultra worked well enough to get me through the trip really without incident. The thing I was most interested in was the camera experience on the Ultra, since it's considered to have one of the best camera arrays in a phone. And I will say that probably my favorite feature of the Ultra by far was that 10x periscope zoom. Man, that is the business right there. We had a Disney Springs view from our hotel room on the first night, but it was really hard to make out any details with your naked eyes. You're just kind of looking out over the balcony there. But I would take that phone, stick it right up against the glass so that it didn't shake at all, switch over to that 10x, and you could get some really amazing detail out of those shots. And I will say that if I were to ever switch to an Android phone, that would be the reason why, is to get that zoom lens. I tell people all the time that, I've sometimes debated if I even need a phone, because I have a tablet, I have my Apple Watch. I really sometimes feel like the phone is the third device, like a distant third, and compared to those. But the camera is the reason why I keep that device around. It's how I document my life, and I document it largely through photos and the occasional video too. But something I didn't realize that I had mentally adapted to is that the iPhone camera app shows you exactly what you're going to get. And when you hit that shutter button, you get that shot, full stop. There's really nothing to worry about there. What you see in the viewfinder is what you're going to get. There were a lot of shots with the Galaxy that I thought I had captured, only to realize that there was some lag in the device or something that caused me to miss the shot. Or if I was panning the camera around, there'd be some frame skipping and things like that, and I felt it was hard to kind of line things up a bit. But I think there were shots that I ended up missing that I would have gotten on the iPhone, and it's just flat out an issue of muscle memory taking over, and I'd move the phone to try to throw it back in my pocket quickly and move on to the next area, and I just didn't anticipate that I'd need to hold on those shots a little bit longer just to make sure that I really kind of nailed them.
Okay, after 2 weeks, we're here with Rob. He's had the Galaxy S22 Ultra for 2 weeks. Really, probably disruptive, but I have to imagine by this point you found some things you weren't expecting and hopefully had a pretty good time. Tell me about the overall experience.
Overall, I'd say that I'm pleasantly surprised that it wasn't as disruptive as I anticipated it being. I thought that there was really no way I'd be able to live with it. That certainly wasn't the case.
Yeah.
Everything more or less worked kind of how I would have expected it to. And I think, if anything, that's just kind of a testament to how far smartphones have come. They've all reached this level where even I'd say the lowest end ones are all pretty decent. You know, they'll all kind of get the job done. It's really a vehicle for apps. And as long as those apps exist on whatever your chosen platform is, you know, you're kind of good to go.
Pretty much all three people previous to you have said essentially the same thing. Their phones, they work the same no matter what you're working on. At the end of the day, it's kind of the same experience. There are some differences, obviously, right? But generally speaking, you're not really missing a whole bunch from either one. Would you agree with that, or do you have a different take on that at all?
You know, I'd say the biggest things for me are that where you do find the differences in the hardware tend to be the most impactful. Like I said, we went to Walt Disney World for a race. Being able to use the camera there and having access to, say, the 10x zoom, that's the first time where kind of like the light went on over my head and I said, hey, this is kind of a big deal. Being able to get shots that I couldn't have gotten before, or the clarity of those shots when you're not having to do the digital zoom to get even even closer. Those were really kind of the big ones for me. And I'm like, if I were ever going to switch to a device like this, that would be the main reason. And for me, my phone really is my camera. I don't even really use it for communication that much. I have other devices that can do that. But really, I keep it around because of the camera, and having access to that level of quality in Zoom was really kind of a big deal for me.
Did it meet your expectations, or was it something that you're now happy that you had with you, or did you wish that you had your iPhone with you with the quality that the iPhone has?
Honestly, I don't think I ever had a moment where I said, man, I really wish I had my iPhone. I had the device. It had the cameras. It got the shots, more or less. And that was really the only time where, you know, I was using the phone for that much, other than, you know, when you're on a Disney trip, you're in there constantly using their app. But again, it's more about the app. One of the things I didn't know that it does, and I don't know if this is an Android thing or a Samsung thing, but their camera app has the ability to turn on a shot composer. So like, it'll look at what you're aiming at and say, hey, adjust your angle this way, and you'll have a really nice shot. I think maybe half the time those were good suggestions. The other half of the time I kind of ignored it, but having that as an option I thought was really cool, and not something I've ever seen the iPhone do. Did
you get to use any of the advanced features like the S Pen or Dex?
I used the S Pen a little bit, just to try it out. Honestly, I mean, I've got the Apple Pencil with my iPad, and I hardly ever use it. I really feel like I kind of wasted the money on it. So not really a game changer as far as I'm concerned. I mean, it might be nice to be able to jot a note down. But if I'm going to like write dedicated notes, I'm going to use something that's more like a sheet of paper to do. I did try out Dex just to say I did. And it's cool. I mean, it's a really cool sort of feature, but I found myself wondering, when would I ever use this? If I'm going to be in front of a screen and have access to be able to plug in a phone like that and want a computer kind of interface, when would I do that I wouldn't have my tablet or have my laptop? I don't think I would ever use it. It's really cool. I'm glad it's there, but it's just not something that's a game changer for me at all.
Do you think anything changed in your opinion between the first week and the second week? Did you learn more in that second week, or was it just all the same?
I think I did. And the main thing that I learned is, just like with any device, you start getting a little deeper into it. You start finding out more that it can do, like that shot composer in the photo app. I only found out about because as I was getting ready to travel with it, I'm like, hey, let's make sure that these, I'm getting the highest quality photos. Let's check all these settings, which it really didn't even occur to me to do until before that. And once I did, and I found some of those additional options, that's when I'm like, oh yeah, there's more here. I'm really just scratched the surface in that first week.
With all that being said, as an incredible Apple lover of all things Apple, if the opportunity came to you to switch to Android, would you do it?
I don't think it's so much better that I would want to potentially move to an entire new ecosystem. I've been using these Slate style phones for so long. They really have gotten to a point where you've largely got parity in terms of features and experience. There's a couple outliers there. If I were going to switch, maybe it would be for a different form factor. I kind of like the idea of the Z Flip rather, not the Fold necessarily. But I like the idea of the Z Flip. But those would be the only reasons why. Honestly, I mean, I just prefer the Apple experience in general.
Sure. As just a 30,000 foot view, kind of walking away from this, what was your experience? Did you enjoy it? Were the things that you learned or the things that you could pass along to the people? What would you say if you had to wrap it all up?
I think the biggest thing I'd say is that it's not as big a deal as it sounds like. I mean, you'd think it would be, but for the most part, I mean, the hardware's there, the software is largely there. You're going to have a very similar sort of experience. Really, the gaps are going to be in the way it interacts with other devices you might have. But those are all things that can be worked around.
All right. Well, listen, thank you so much for joining me on this. Everyone else, listen, I've been doing this a couple of times. I'm going to do it a couple of times more. There'll be a playlist link here and in the description below. And thanks, Rob, for joining me today. And I'll see you guys and gals next time. Peace and love.